From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
Okay, welcome back. This is John. This is the Dewey Pod Monster podcast. This is your weekly podcast about consumption. On this show, we talk about movies. We talk about beer, booze, and other things, you know, whatever fancies this week. With me, as always, is my co-host, the hater of clowns and the lover of the Golden Girls, and the authority on Michigan craft beer, Sean. Sean, how are you doing today?
Oh, yeah. I'm doing great, brother.
See, now that's not going to make sense because what we just talked about didn't happen. So,
yes, it did. It really did happen. We're just not talking about it quite yet. We're time traveling. That's what it is.
So how are you doing today, muchacho man, Sean Draft Therapy?
I'm doing great. We haven't had any issues recording this today, so I'm just, easy come, easy go.
If you can't tell, Sean's full of shit at the moment, but that's okay. So, what have you been up to this week?
Same old, wanting to destroy my computer when we start recording this. Watching some shows. The Boys on Amazon Prime. I don't think you watch it because you said you didn't last time I asked you about it. Been watching that.
I said there's a lot of dicks and wieners and stuff, so that's a plus.
This isn't a spoiler, and I know it just came out. So it just it just debuted on June 4th. The first 3 episodes, I think, is up on Amazon Prime for the 3rd season. And in the first scene, they're tracking this like superhero, this soup that can, his name's a termite, and he can get really big, like normal size, kind of like Ant-Man, or he can shrink down. And there is a scene where he shrinks down and crawls into a guy's urethra. So
wasn't that what they wanted Ant-Man to do in the Avengers movie to save the day?
Maybe.
Like, wasn't that
it was
the
up the
Internet
back.
fan theory?
It was up the back, I thought.
That was it?
Is up his ass. I think.
Similar concept.
Yeah.
So,
well, he goes, but they show the penis on the, it's a CGI penis, but they show it like on a table and he just crawls into it. So that's a little disturbing. But yeah. So I've been watching The Boys, watched the first couple episodes of that. And I've been watching Barry from HBO Max, the Bill Hader show about the hitman. And then there's a movie from the Canadian Film Board, and it's only available on YouTube. It's available for free on YouTube, but only if you're in Canada. So if you have a VPN, I VPN into Toronto or Montreal or someplace, and I can watch this, and it's the Star Wars kid, basically meme about the kid with the broomstick or whatever it is, and it goes through how they talk to him current day, and they ask him about, like, why did he do this? What was the reason for making this video? What happened? How did it get online? And then the aftermath of all the virality of, early internet culture, basically. It's like 2000, I'll say 2003 or so, 2002, maybe a little bit earlier than that. But
I thought that came out like around the time of the Phantom Menace. Like that would have been like, what, 99?
It was definitely after 2000. We started watching Phantom Menace on a VCD, if you know what that is. Yeah, it's like a DVD, but you put it on a CD. But yeah, so I watched that. Like I said, I had to be logged in. I've only watched about half an hour of it. I think it's about an hour and 20 minutes. So I haven't gotten too far into it. Intrigues me. And it came out in March. So I've been kind of forgetting about watching it because there's just so much other stuff to watch. What have you been watching?
Well, I didn't just watch stuff this week. I caught up on a bunch of old Albumer podcasts. For those who don't know what that is, so basically the writers and the hosts of 2 Minutes to Late Night, which is essentially like a goth metal version of a late night show that does a lot of cover songs. If you don't watch them, I strongly recommend that you subscribe to their channel because they're hilarious. They basically do a podcast where they talk about old, horrible. The first one that I had ever heard of them, they were talking about the Metallica album Lulu, which is basically their, not duet, they did an album with Lou Reed and the whatever, and it's fucking terrible. But like some of the ones that I've caught up on this week that were highlights and worth listening to would be they're talking about an ICP album, and I don't remember which one because I don't care.
Hey, you don't want the Juggalos coming after us.
I don't really care. I don't think the Juggalos are listening to this. We do have a clown episode that's out at this point, so maybe they will.
Spark their interest.
That's true. Clowns. They also talk about the Macho Man Randy Savage hip hop album, which is one, if you haven't heard that album, go back and listen to the title track, Be a Man. It's a diss track aimed at Hulk Hogan, and it is just the most like oozing like 1998 like bravado, like horrible clean hip hop on the planet. It's fantastic.
Is he a major rapper and he's here to say that he loves Fruity Pebbles in a major way?
More or less. He's a little more like Macho Man Randy Savage about it, but more or less. Currently, I think I have the Return of Bruno episode on, which is talking about Bruce Willis's solo album he did before he did Die Hard. So I'm only like 25 minutes into that one, though, so I got some time to go on that. Then I also caught up and finished the show Pistol, which is the like kind of rockumentary, I guess, about the Sex Pistols that was directed by Danny Boyle. Didn't really dig it all too much. You know, I'm not a big Sex Pistols fan, and there's a lot of this that feels like it very, very much so has a lot of the like hard edges just kind of smoothed down with some sandpaper to make it a little bit more friendly for, I guess, a Disney audience. But it's a Danny Boyle, you know, production, so it looks good and it's very stylized. It's very fucking British, so it's got all that going for it. The guys who play each of the characters are pretty good in it. Like although the guy who plays Johnny Rotten doesn't really look like Johnny Rotten, he kind of moves and acts like him, so it all fits. The guy who plays Sid Vicious is like spot on as far as I can tell. So if you like the Sex Pistols, check it out. If you like punk rock, watch it, but be pissed off about it, kind of like I was. So
yeah, it's more like a good reference point on the Sex Pistols more than maybe if you're not a fan of the Sex Pistols, I would guess.
Yeah, and I would say if you have any interest in it, kind of like you were talking about with Winning Time, if you have any interest in it, you might want to watch it sooner than later, because Johnny Rotten is suing the band and Hulu or Disney or whatever, trying to get it removed. So I kind of doubt that will happen, but you never know. So maybe the courts in England are more favorable towards Johnny Rotten than, you know, whatever. But past that, I watched some really shitty movie on Netflix last night called Interceptor.
Is it about the Mad Max car?
No, it's far worse than that.
Oh, no.
My wife told me to watch it. She's comes home and she goes, I watched some really horrible movie last night. The basis of this movie is these interceptors are like the people who block rockets from like nukes and stuff from hitting America when they're launched. And for some reason, this all-American girl has a super thick Russian accent, and these Russians come and shoot nukes at America, and that's pretty much it. But the reason I watched it, I was like, so is this, I looked it up, and it got like 4 out of 10 on IMDb. So I was like, okay, is this bad, like the kind of bad that I like, or is this bad, like just bad? She goes, I don't know how to answer that. I'm like, is it like Steven Seagal minus the like teaching cops how to do kung fu in real life? She goes, yeah, kind of. I'm like, all right, I'll give it a try. And it's, aside from a couple like really stupid fucking moments that I would say even if you get 10 minutes into it, it's worth watching for that. So I don't want to ruin it. It is a really dumb fucking movie. So,
but is it worth the watch?
Like, it's worth watching for the first big stupid thing that happens. And I'm not going to say what it is because it's stupid enough that once it happens, you'll know what it is. And then just kind of turn it off because it doesn't get any better from there. Because all you're going to do is be like, again, this is a woman who is like a highly decorated, just like a corporal or something like that. It's some branch of the military. And, you know, her dad was in the military, and her dad's like straight out of Tennessee, like pure, like, you know, white guy in America type, you know, American dude. And here she comes with this thick ass Russian accent. I'm like, where is this accent coming from? Why is this part of the script? So
is there anybody that you would know in the cast from the movie?
Thor's in it. So
okay.
His wife is the main character in it, and before this movie, the only thing I can think of that I saw her in was Snakes on a Plane.
I have heard of this. When you said his wife, he's in it, and his wife and Snakes on a Plane totally rings a bell.
He's like a cameo in it. He's only in it for like 5 minutes. The bad guy in it, I don't know who he is, but he looks like John Cena if John Cena went on like, you know, major muscle loss program of some sort. I mean, all around, like, it's trying to be a Steven Seagal movie. It's trying to be like Under Siege or something like that, but it's not as entertaining, mostly because this chick is not Steven Seagal.
Who is?
Like,
is Steven Seagal even Steven Seagal anymore?
Last thing I saw him in that I liked him in was Machete Kills. That was probably 10 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
So I don't even know if he still does movies at this point.
I think he does, but he probably does them all in Cyrillic or some
streaming
shit.
or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. So that's pretty much all I got as far as stuff that I've been watching this week. Now, normally on this show, I reserve news items for when we're just kind of drunk and rambling on a beer episode, but something dropped today that directly relates to our title for the week. Did you hear that Neve Campbell's not going to be in the new Scream movie that's coming out next year? Scream 6?
I did not. Is she a newly reformed Christian or something, or is there a better reason?
Money. So,
oh, okay.
At least that's what I've read, is that she went in with a dollar amount and they didn't want to pay it to her, so she's walking. I mean, I also, as much as I love this franchise, I kind of feel like they probably should have moved away from Neve Campbell after the third movie, because at some point it kind of feels like, so how many fucking like maniacs can go after this woman and have no luck at killing her?
Mm-hmm.
You know, like at some point, doesn't one of them stop with the phone and just go shoot her?
I haven't seen, I guess we'll probably get into this as we talk about this. So us going through this series is going to be another journey for me, because I've seen some of them, but at a certain point it was just kind of like, oh, okay, another Scream's coming out.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe we'll get into that as we talk about it.
All right. Well, if you haven't figured out by now, our topic for the week is the 1996 movie Scream, not the 2022 Scream. The original movie. Like I said, this was released in 1996 and is currently the 510th ranked film on IMDb. Scream is a movie that is widely known to have revitalized the slasher genre in the 90s. It spawned a bunch of copycat movies to the point where I actually, for a while, didn't like this movie because all you got were these Scream knockoffs, which I unfairly took out on the original movie, for better or worse. What the movie does is basically a whodunit movie in a small town, fictional town of Woodsboro, where a group of teens are stalked and occasionally killed by a killer in a ghost face mask. The movie is written by Kevin Williamson, who later went on to write, The Dawson's Creek, Glory Days, and I Know What You Did Last Summer. And it is very loosely based on the Gainesville Ripper, which is a real life serial killer out of the, I want to say Gainesville. Fucking moron. Gainesville area in Florida, and this is the first 4 movies in this series were directed by Wes Craven. If you don't know who Wes Craven is, then I'm not going to try to walk you up that line. Wes Craven's a legend. So if you're listening to this show, there's a strong chance that you know who the hell Wes Craven is.
I would say there's probably a 99% chance that you should know. If you don't know how you found this podcast, but I'm glad you're listening.
I agree with that as well. I think the best place to start with this movie, though, is really just with, in my opinion, this movie, like I said, this movie has really grown on me a lot since I was about like 25 or so. So well after it came out and had some time to live on and make some sequels and all that. I honestly think this movie might have the best opening scene in any horror movie ever. And I know that's a strong statement, but the way this movie plays out, I mean, this movie, again, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen this like 30-year-old movie at this point, but this movie opens with, the poster for this movie, the original poster has Drew Barrymore front and center on the cover. She's the top billed cast member on this movie. At the time, she was without a doubt the biggest star in this movie, and arguably one of the biggest stars on the planet at that point, probably still is. And in this movie, they give you this real, like, creepy phone call that's voiced by Mojo Jojo from the Powerpuff Girls, where he immediately starts kind of breaking down how these people are going to get picked off from the movie kind of one by one, and does it in this real fascinating way that draws you in and kind of makes you just kind of want to see where things are going. And it really, that scene ends with what I would say is probably the most brutal death in the entire franchise up to this point.
Up to this point, you're talking about Drew Barrymore?
Yeah, up to this point, up to the 2022 Scream 5, whatever. Like, okay. I think that is, up to this point in the franchise, the first kill in this movie is still the most brutal and still it's the most intense and almost the most, like, creative of all the kills that really come through this entire franchise.
Yeah, I was just misunderstanding when you said to this point. I thought you meant to the point in the movie, and it's like the first kill. So it's kind of like, what? Yeah, it's very shocking, too. It's not...
She's technically the second kill in the movie.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. It was very
So-
shocking. I remember when this movie came out in 96, seeing it, and I don't know if I saw it in the theater or if I saw it on DVD or VHS or whatever it was, but I don't even know if I had a DVD player, so it was probably VHS. But, watching this movie, and again, like you said, on the poster, seeing Drew Barrymore's name, like front and center, big, top billing, and you see this movie and she's in the opening scene of the movie, and it gets right into it. It doesn't take any time to develop. It's just kind of like the phone rings, Drew Barrymore picks up the phone, and then it's on, So when she gets killed, as we mentioned, it was really shocking because, you see her name at the top, and I can't think, I was just looking it up and I can't think of the movie. I want to say like one of the Alfred Hitchcock movies, maybe not. Was it Psycho? Yeah. The shower scene with Janet Leigh.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I don't know if Janet Leigh was as big of a star at that point as Drew Barrymore was in 96, or at least a common, household name. But that happens and you're like, what the hell is the rest of this movie going to be? If the top person that you're expecting to be in this movie is gone, and the rest of the actors, I don't think there were, I mean, I guess we had, Courtney Cox and we have David Arquette there, there's a lot of named actors that you recognize, but I think
you recognize them a lot more now than you would have then. Like Courtney Cox at this point,
it's Friends, a couple years in. Friends.
She had Friends, but at that point, because this is pre-internet, so, well, except for a scene that I'm going to talk about. Yeah, like this isn't like where you're watching a show and you just pick up a phone. You don't pick up your phone and like
you're
Google
calling movie phone.
You're watching. Yeah, like not quite. You might, at this point, you might go into this movie and be like, I kind of recognize this person from something, but it's not as easy to wasn't as easy to just place a young actress like that wasn't in a bunch of stuff as it is now, where if you're watching, Scream on your TV at home, you're like, this chick looks familiar. You just IMDb, Scream and pull up the entire cast and everything they've ever done.
Yeah, but I think that a lot of these actors were people that for me personally, I have like this thing with people's faces. Like I remember people's faces really well, and recognizing and that's not like any kind of humble brag, or I'm not trying to, I'm so cool. It's just a thing that I do. It's like I can remember trivia. I just have a way to remember certain things, and I don't know how I do it, and then sometimes I wish I didn't. But seeing a lot of these actors, Neve Campbell, I think, was maybe in Party of Five, may have started by now, but she was still like one of her early roles, or at least as an adult. Seeing, I think Rose McGowan.
She's only like 22 in this movie.
Yeah, I think she's 21. Yeah, 21, 22. Rose McGowan.
Yeah.
I didn't recognize her from much. David Arquette, Matthew Lillard, of course. Skeet Ulrich, no. There was no way. Jamie Kennedy, no. Didn't recognize him from anything. David Arquette, maybe. But, when you see, going back to Drew Barrymore just getting finished so early in the movie, yeah, it definitely left that. It was shocking. And you're like, again, what the hell are they going to do in this movie? Like, what is this thing going to be about if the main person that you came here to see this movie, if she's gone?
Yeah, but I mean, you go back and there's a million behind the scenes things on this movie. And when they got her, I mean, the story goes that she was originally like gonna play the role of Sidney Prescott, but for whatever reason, scheduling didn't allow her to do that. And when Wes Craven took on the movie, part of why he took it on was because she was in there. And then when he found out she wasn't going to be there for very long, he decided that killing her off was going to make the movie that much more powerful. And I can't really argue him. It definitely worked.
Yeah, especially hindsight.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, once this movie moves past the opening scene, we move into the kids' high school, Woodville High, I guess. And of course, everyone in town is talking about, the teenage girl that just got murdered. The Fonz is in this movie, and he's a real prick as his principal. Like, I thought he was going to, just murder some students just for being pricks, which would have been funny. I mean, he's got scissors in this that, make Edward Scissorhands look like a bitch.
Oh, and they add the sound effects, the brandishing of the thing. And it's funny because when I saw this initially, and I saw Henry Winkler was in this, I was like, God, this fucking guy's in this movie. And he does really great. And the funny thing is now, watching it, like I said, I've been watching Barry, and Henry Winkler's like a main character. He's Mr. Cousineau, the acting teacher. He's like the acting teacher in Barry. And I see him, and that's all I think of when I see him now. As before, seeing him the first time around, all I think of is The Fonz, or maybe some other movie or show he was in. I guess maybe, you watch it, you might think Arrested Development or something. But now when I see it, because it's so fresh in my mind, I just think, oh, it's Mr. Cousineau. But he does play out of type. in this big
Yeah.
time.
I don't know why, but the movie I always go back to for him, I always call him the Fonz, but the movie I always think of him in is The Waterboy for some reason. I don't even really like that movie, but for whatever reason, he's the person that's the movie I go back to for him. So I don't even know that he's that good in that movie. He's just kind of there. So,
Right.
but this is where in the high school you start getting introduced to the rest of the cast. So you start seeing everyone you just mentioned, Nev Campbell, Rose McGowan, Skeet Ulrich, Lillard, and Jamie Kennedy. They're all just kind of talking about, the night before and all that type of stuff. And they're doing typical kid shit. They're essentially accusing each other of murdering their classmate and so on. So they go to class, blah, blah, blah. It kind of progresses. They end up heading home.
Yeah, but you start to really get the backstory on Nev Campbell's character, on Sydney, and they're kind of all her friends, basically the core group of friends, Rose McGowan, Matthew Lillard, Skeet Ulrich, Jamie Kennedy, and Nev Campbell. They're joking around about, the murder or whatnot, because Drew Barrymore and her boyfriend get murdered, and they're like somewhat popular. He's like a football player. She's probably a more popular kid. And you start to see like the PTSD, like the Nev Campbell's kind of story. You don't get the full story just yet, but it's coming, and you soon find out that her mother, it's like almost a year. It's a few days short of a year since her mother was murdered, and Sydney's testimony put a guy away, basically to sentence to death. So she's kind of living through that trauma. And I thought that was kind of watching it on this rewatch, thinking that was really odd that she's just kind of not necessarily moved on, but all this happens within a year. And she seems like she's, other than gory details or when people talk about her mother, it really bothers her. Other than that, she's just kind of like, oh, yeah, whatever. Mom died. It sucked. It was just kind of like a footnote to the story. She was just like, it didn't seem like that big of a deal, but later you get that backstory. And I want to say that, they had the students running through the hall, with the ghost face mask, which is Father Death, I think is when they show the costume, it's known as Father
Something
Death.
Like that, yeah.
Yeah, so you see the kids running through the hall, and she's like Sydney's getting stalked in the school. I think that happens even before Henry Winkler, the principal.
Is this where the bathroom scene happens?
I believe it's it's either before or after the principal.
It's right after Henry Winkler goes after. No, it's before the principal gets it, but right after he's like threatening the kids with the gigantic scissors. It's like right in the middle there, because they're not in the school very long before they send everyone home.
Yeah, so the bathroom scene has to happen before he dies. Right.
So at this point, though, you don't really know who the bad guy is. It's very much so this mystery, and that you're just kind of getting used to this character of Ghostface. They actually do a pretty good job of making you act like kind of like all these kids. You're going to find kids in this that, at least as someone who went to high school in the 90s, all these kids seem very, very, especially Randy. They all part of my personality was Randy in a lot of ways, yelling at people about horror movies that didn't care to hear about it.
Yeah.
I totally relate to that. So
go away, nerd.
Yeah, very much so. So, I mean, they do a really good job of they don't develop the characters to the point of making you feel like you need their life story, but they develop them a good amount to make it feel like there's a natural relationship between all of them, and it plays really well throughout the whole movie.
Yeah, I would say that this is I was just going to say, I would say that this is a really good encapsulation of being a teenager or a high school student. Maybe not so much. These kids are all pretty well off. The houses are really nice. Yeah. Maybe not that part of it, but they really encapsulate with the fashion, obviously, the way the kids talk to each other, the things that they talk about. It really is a good kind of time capsule for 1996. Being a high school student in 1996, I was a little bit outside of high school, but I could still relate to a lot of the things that they were kind of talking about and kind of going through.
Yeah, and it plays like how the way they talk and the dialogue they have sounds appropriate for the age that they're showing on screen. Yeah. It doesn't sound like they're using, thesaurus words and shit, as opposed to just telling each other they're going to kill each other, shit like that.
One of my favorite lines is when they're talking and Sydney's kind of showing that she's stressed out about them talking about her mom or murder or whatever. And Skeet Ulrich says to Matthew Lillard, "It's called tact fuck rag. It's like, that's great dialogue, you know. It's like tact, and I'm going to use tactful language and call you a fuck rag. So it was funny. I thought that was good.
Yeah, and there's actually a lot of good like moments of humor throughout this movie just from the dialogue. Like even all the way in the third act when shit's off the rails on it, there's genuinely like funny moments. I'll get to one of my favorite lines in the movie later because we're not there yet, but it does make you laugh kind of through the whole thing from start to finish. It's a really, really well written movie, and I can see why Kevin Williamson for like a decade there was like the hottest writer in Hollywood for a while. One of the things that's fun about this movie, so you're going to hear this movie called, maybe not by us, but this movie is called Meta as Hell. It's often hailed as being like the first real meta horror movie, even though this happens after A New Nightmare, which is kind of the same concept, but
yeah.
Freddy. I really like that this movie not only exists in a world that horror movies exist, but also horror movies that we know about exist. So when they're going on about Prom Night or Halloween or whatever, whichever movie they're talking about, you're like, oh, I have seen that movie. And if you haven't seen that movie, it gives you a reference point to go back, like, how the hell have I not seen Halloween? Even though this movie, like, I don't know what copy of Halloween Randy's watching because it like starts over 30 times throughout the course of this movie. But
I think it's almost like there's elements of Halloween 2 in there, and there's parts that are just straight up Halloween. So it's this crazy machete order cut of the Halloween story.
But I also like that, we get a killer in this that is, and really to this entire franchise, has never been supernatural. Up to this point, the majority of slasher movies, or at least successful slasher movies, have had some element of like not real going on. I mean, you could, aside from the first Halloween movie, like the original, the 1978 one, all these movies are like unfucking possible to happen. Like, there's no way obviously Freddy's not real. Jason is like a space like cyborg zombie at this point,
right,
or whatever he is. And really, like I said, once you get past the first Halloween movie, and even arguably we'll say once you get into Halloween 2 and going forward, you can't get shot in the head and stabbed in the brain and all that shit and keep killing people. You might not die, but you're not going to be functional. Yeah.
They're all, like you said, they all have some kind of supernatural ability or the ability to just tolerate massive amounts of pain.
Right. Or brain damage.
Right.
Whatever.
Well, maybe they're already brain damaged. I guess that's arguable.
Well, Jason is. I don't know about the rest of them. So, but I mean, that's one of the things that you get with this. You don't have any weird, like, I guess that's why, like, one of the things that people will kind of bash this series for is that the kills are not very creative. It's a lot of just like stab, dead, cut, dead type stuff. But it kind of works for this series because if they were doing weird things like, I don't know, brandishing like 4 different chainsaws with 2 hands somehow, it wouldn't really play to how this series works. Basically, after the kids in the high school keep being pricks and dressing up like Ghostface and running around, the city puts in a citywide curfew, sends everyone home for, I guess, the foreseeable future until further notice. And we are basically catapulted right from Act 1 into Act 3, essentially. Like any good teenager, the kids decide, hey, we don't have to go to school. There's a killer on the loose. Let's have a party.
All right, it's party time. Perfect timing to have a party.
Right. As one does. This, like I said, so this gets all our main characters back to one centralized location. So everyone gets to this party, and this is where shit kind of starts to hit the fan. This is where kids really start dropping off, and it's, again, these kills aren't really like over. Well, I guess the first one that happens is with the garage door. That doesn't really seem practical because that's not how garage doors work. But
and this was the one that I remember the most, but I didn't remember all the details. Like, Rose McGowan basically crawls through this. She gets locked out of the house. The ghost face is in the garage with her, and she's trying to get away from him. There's this fight, and she starts crawling through this dog door, basically. I think it's actually a cat door, but she starts crawling through this dog door. Ghostface hits the button. She goes, somehow the garage door lifts her up with her sticking like a quarter of the way through the doggy door, and her neck gets crushed between basically the edge of the garage door and the edge of the house. And it just kind of sparks and sputters, but it's still, the chain, nothing doesn't slip, nothing. That's the best I want to know what brand that garage door opener was, but opens up, and she's
I would like
actually
to know too, because whenever I try to open my garage door, it's like a struggle just to get it to realize that there's not a person sitting under it.
right.
So,
And she is the first person, I think, well, in that case, the first person in the franchise to actually refer to the killer as Ghostface. Like I said, we saw the costume before, the principal's carrying the costume. It says Father Death on it, but she refers to, poor little Ghostface, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, so that's a pretty unbelievable one. But also the thing is, like, she's going out to get the beer. Like, she's restocking up beer. Nobody else at the party decides to go get any beer. They don't notice that, there's a body hanging.
Funny? So no one ever notices the body hanging there, except for Nev Campbell later, because she gets thrown out the thing and sees it. But I did notice when I watched it this time, and somehow I'd never noticed it before, there's several people in the party that ask, hey, where's Tatum at? Where'd Tatum go? And you hear Stu just go, oh, she's probably pissed at me. She must have gone home, whatever.
Right.
So it is something that, for all the people that say, like, that no one notices it, people don't ever go see this body hanging from the garage, apparently, which I would think you would notice.
Well, especially if you're looking for the beer. I mean, come on.
But they do mention, like, hey, where the hell did you go? But this kind of starts the thing that's really a tradition through the entire Scream movie one of the things I really like about this is, and I don't know which one of them is the character that's actually doing the killing in that scene. I've seen videos where they try to break it down. I don't care that much.
Right.
It's not that big a deal. But you do see a lot of Lillarding and a lot of Scooby-Doo-ness in Ghostface. Like, whenever you watch Ghostface get in a fight with anyone, no matter who's playing who's the Ghostface in this movie, they're not a very good killer. There's a lot of, like, fuddling around. Like, even with this, like, Tatum, like, smacks him in the face with the garage door. She throws a beer bottle at him.
A couple of them.
She, like, trips him. Yeah, she puts a hurt on him before, this stupid attempted escape through the garage door. And even watching, like, her go up in the garage door, when they cut to Ghostface, he's like, holy shit, this is working. And he looks kind of goofy in the process.
He's
of doing
dumbfounded that the whole thing worked.
Yeah, so it's got a little bit of, like, comic bookiness almost to how Ghostface tries to, like, attack people. He's never very, like, good at it, which makes sense because these are teenagers.
Yeah, kids.
So,
right.
So after Tatum, she's dead. Somewhere along the lines here, Randy gets a call that the Fonz is dead and that he's hanging from the goalpost, which, how the fuck they managed to get a dead body out of the principal's office where all the police were because they were closing the school, drag it and string it up on the goalpost after you already see Stu leave. So it would have just been Skeet doing that, or Billy, I'm sorry. I call him Skeet usually. So it's a good name. So how you manage to drag a body from, like, out of a school to a football field and string a body, it doesn't seem plausible considering what's going on in the town at that point.
Well, when they show the police station, though, all the police are there. There's like, it's a commotion going on inside this. I mean, it's a small ass town. You can't be that many officers.
True. We do have a break for Dewey to go get ice cream. So
yeah. And this whole thing is playing against this backdrop of Courtney Cox's character, who plays Gail Weathers, right? Is it Gail Weathers?
Yep.
And she's like a Inside Edition or a current affair kind of host of it, but it's a local TV show. Yeah.
Yeah. It's almost like what you would, like, I would think TMZ would be what it's like now.
Yeah. It's like tabloid TV, and it's really a good commentary on 1996, like celebrity culture.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much celebrity culture, but like trying to find, like, true crime. I mean, it would even be relevant today with all the true crime podcasts and TV shows and everything surrounding the true crime industry.
It'd be like the modern day version of trying to find clickbait and tragedy.
Yeah.
So
yeah, exploiting tragedy, and she's familiar with Sydney's mother's case. She is writing a book. Sydney refers to it a lot. She
how's wrote the book coming? At this point.
Oh, is the book out?
Yeah, she wrote the book at this point. That's why Sydney's all pissed off at her.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if she was writing or if the book had been written, but it brings up a lot of questions about Sydney's mother and, like, what the motive was and who actually killed her mother. And that was one of the notes I took is, so Liev Schreiber is in this movie, but he's only in it for a few minutes. He plays the man, Cotton Weary, who gets convicted of killing Sydney's mother. And I thought, I
I don't think you even see him other than a quip that's on TV.
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
movie.
You don't see him like actually saying anything, but it's just like footage of him
Yeah.
walking basically either in the courtroom or walking from in shackles. But I thought that was another thing. It was like Sydney not only shows PTSD when, you know, someone's talking about murder, but this is a year and this guy got convicted and he's on death row like in a year. That's a pretty expeditious judicial system. You know, I don't know if anybody even gets a trial within a year these days.
Doesn't seem like it. So, I mean, it took them a month and a half just to find someone not liable of pooping in a bed or whatever they did. Anyway, so at this point, get all the other kids other than 5 characters out of the house to go chase down the Fonz. In the process, a bunch of drunken teens run a cop and Gale Weathers off the road and kind of rough them up a little bit. Should have said that the cops are at this party for whatever fucking reason.
Well, Dewey, which is Tatum's sister. Yeah, he's been tasked with watching Sydney to keep an eye on her, and he's like, he doesn't even care that they're drinking, you know,
or that his sister's dead. So,
yeah, that's true too. But he's just hanging around and, you know,
right. He's busy trying to hook up with Gale.
Right.
So basically, they get everyone out of the house, and this is where, all right, Skeet comes back. There's time for the like sex scene, which kind of breaks the horror movie rules because, again, spoiler, Neve Campbell doesn't die in this movie, but she does get laid in this movie, so good for her.
And they even announced the rules. Jamie Kennedy's character, which I don't remember what his name is, but
Randy.
Yeah, Randy. Randy even gives you the rules that you have to be a virgin, you know? So I think
he's giving the rules as they're fucking.
Yeah. So, or at least right around that time.
Right. So they do their thing, and then Stu comes in and has like the worst fake stab in the history of fake stabs. It's really bad because you see him like cut, and the way that he moves the knife, he goes from shoulder to shoulder, so from like left to right or right whatever. And then when Skeet turns around, his blood stains are vertical, like up and down his shirt. I'm like, yeah, it's not very believable. But I guess if you're watching someone get assaulted, you might not be paying that close attention or whatever.
You're not taking notes on the angle of insertion,
entry, exit wounds, or what? Yeah. They already did that part. So.
Yeah, right. We saw that part. That was when Randy was given the rules.
Basically, at this point, like, Ghostface is Scooby-Dooing in and out of doors. Like, they might as well just set a camera at the end of a hallway and watch him run in and out of several different doors back and forth. He's chasing Neve Campbell, and essentially for the rest of this movie, up until like the very end, you're just kind of watching that. You still don't know that Stu is one of the killers. You actually don't know that either of them are the killers at this point. So you're watching Ghostface kind of pop in and out of different places. Truthfully, I remember the first time that I saw this, I was like, fuck is he here? Well, he can't be this guy. It does a good job the first time you watch it of hiding who the killer is.
Oh, yeah.
And giving you strong, reasonable doubt through the entire movie. Like, this guy should be the killer, but well, maybe not. And they do the best job with Skeet Ulrich because until you watch it 50 times, you're not going to think about how he was stabbed or anything. You just see a guy get stabbed by this killer and assume he's dead. So,
yeah. And I'll tell you, the first time I watched this, it was, you know, I knew it was kind of a whodunit. You know, you're trying to figure out who the killer is. And while you mentioned Mojo Jojo is the actor who, I forgot his name. What is it, like Jackson?
It's like Randy Johnson or something. I think that's a guy in Journey, actually. Roger Jackson. I was close.
Yeah, okay. So Roger Jackson is the voice of Ghostface, of the killer on the phone. But the sheriff of the city, when you hear him talk just in normal, his voice sounds very similar. And I was like, oh, it's going to be him, you know? But when I watched this the first time, and obviously he isn't the killer, but we go through it, and the first time you watch it, it's like, it's a mind blower, you know, like,
yeah.
I never saw a movie where they played it off like it was one person the whole time. And when you get to finish it, it's not one person, it's more than one, 2 people in this case. And the thing I thought was funny is watching it this time and knowing that twist is in it and what the twist is. You can totally see, like, I'm sure that there are breakdowns on YouTube or wherever where people...
Oh, there are.
Yeah, I'm sure there are zillions of them where they break down, like, okay, this is this person because XYZ, but you can totally see it. And this is written so, like, masterfully that they it's actually conceivable that it could be these two people. It's not, it doesn't play off like, oh, they just kind of threw it in at the end. The whole movie, they're telegraphing that there are multiple people in it, and you see one character kind of stumble in a scene or maybe run in kind of out of breath, or you see another one, or the other one's there. So it's a really interesting way that they kind of put the whole horror thing, killer, on its ear, because you're used to it being, like you said earlier, Freddy or Michael Myers or whoever, like the single killer. And in this case, it's multiple.
Well, and what's interesting about it, so we'll get to the actual like end in a second, but this movie holds up really well. Like this is a movie that I probably rewatch once, maybe twice a year, something. Well, this one especially, I might get in a mood and just kind of like go, because there's only 5 of these right now. They don't take that long to get through them, so I might get in a mood and just kind of crank through a bunch of them. This one in particular, I watch this one at least once a year, and it still holds up really well. And even knowing where, like, you don't get the jump scares anymore that you would have got from the first one, because that type of stuff's coming.
Yeah,
but the storyline, the way it plays out, the way the characters acted out, the little things that you're going to notice as you watch it more and more. Okay, yes, I know what the ending is going to be, but there's a ton of really good, like I was saying, there's details in it that you're going to pick up that you wouldn't otherwise. Like I just mentioned about Tatum, and how you will hear people leaving the house and saying, hey, where the hell's Tatum?
Mm-hmm.
I've been watching this movie since it came out, and I don't remember hearing those lines before Saturday when I watched this again. So, it really is as far as like, it's a horror movie, so people will kind of shit on it for that, but it is a masterfully done script in how it's written and how it was directed and played out from start to finish. Before we get into the finale, since we're in kind of the point where the movie's starting to kind of ratchet up and go off the rails, some scenes that I just want to say that I really love. I love when they have her locked in when she locks the doors in the car, and Ghostface comes out and dangles the keys at her and just starts fucking with her. He doesn't even open the door. He just starts fucking with her while she's in there. I thought that was pretty great. I didn't care about this scene that much until I realized the scene where Randy's sitting on the couch and Ghostface is right behind him. He goes outside to kill the news van guy. I really like that he keeps saying, no, Jamie, look out, Jamie, like right behind you, Jamie, because the actor's name is Jamie. I was like, oh, that's a nice little twist that I never picked up on until, much later down the road. But that's the kind of thing that's like, gee, or you ever see yourself in a horror movie? There you are. You're the drunk guy on the couch watching a horror movie while the killer's right behind you.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, doesn't kill you. Some of the others, like the other thing that's really interesting but kind of great too, shortly after, so I'm assuming it's Stu that's fucking with her in the car, because he comes running into frame without the Ghostface costume on, maybe like 2 minutes after this, and you got Randy and you got Stu there, and they're both kind of, and Sydney's got a gun at this point. Oh yeah, Dewey gets stabbed in this process, so she takes Dewey's gun. Dewey kind of sucks in this movie. He gets better later in the series, but in this movie he kind of sucks. So she's got a gun pointed at, kind of flipping between Randy or Stu, and they're both saying, hey, shoot him, shoot him.
Yeah.
So if I'm Nev Campbell in that, I'm shooting both. That's not what happened. These people are such friends that she lets them back in the house, essentially. And that's where you get the reveal that there's 2 killers. They get back in the house and holy shit, there's Billy, or there's Skeet, and he's all bloody. And I forget how he gets the gun, but all of a sudden he shoots Jamie Kennedy in the, like, he'll be okay for the sequel spot.
Yeah.
So he shoots him, puts him down, and he turns around and, drops a psycho line where, like, the most famous line that you could arguably drop to make everyone be like, oh, this guy watches horror movies. And that's where you find out that Skeet Ulrich, or Billy Loomis, Dr. Loomis, is at this point, he's the killer in this movie. You still don't quite know about Stu yet. And so Nev's freaking out because she just, banged her person who's about to kill her. And Stu comes back into frame, and he actually does a really good job of looking like he's upset for like 2 seconds until he pulls out the voice changer thing.
Yeah.
And starts fucking with her again. And you're like, holy shit, there's 2 killers. And that's where this movie opens into the whole, like, I don't want to call it the third act, but really the final act of the movie. Because I feel like the third act is basically once they get to this party. And this is where you start getting the killers who have to do the, like, Bond villain thing where they tell her what's going to happen before they fuck
tell
it
the
up.
whole plot.
So what's interesting about it, though, is, the movie, they did two different versions of this ending with both the killers. They had one version where the killers had no motive, and they say this several times throughout the movie, having no motive would be more fucked up or whatever. And then they do another version where there's a motive. And every time they did test screenings for the movie, people, like, almost right down the middle, 50% said no motive was better, 50% said motive was better. So they just split the motives between the two killers. They gave Stu the no motive thing, and they gave Skeet this really in-depth, like, kind of stupid motive, but kind of makes sense at the same time. So essentially what ends up happening with it is you find out that Sydney's dead mom was having sex with Skeet's father, which basically ruined his family. So this is all a big revenge plot for him. You get more Lillarding in this scene because they decide to stab each other to make it look real, which I don't know why you wouldn't kill her first and then, first, cops tend to do forensics, so that's not going to work. But in a world where cops don't do, because this is post OJ trial, so, let's just pretend cops don't do forensic at this point. They're still going to check things like, exit wounds and, what's that, GSR or whatever, shit that's traceable. So they start stabbing each other and being stupid. There's some really good lines by Lillard here. Like, this is actually one of his best, like, performances is when he's all bloody and beat up and shit. He starts really saying funny things like, she kind of gets loose and calls the cops, and he's like, "Did you really call the cops? My parents are going to be pissed."
This is his house too, isn't it?
Yeah, it's his house in this movie. Or his parents' house.
Right.
This is where Gail comes back, and she's all beat to shit because she just, like, ran into a tree at, like, 30 miles an hour. This is where my favorite line comes in from Stu, where Billy says, I thought she was dead. And he goes, "She looked dead, man. She still does." She's sitting there holding a gun at him. I always thought that was a really well delivered line. And basically, this is where the Bond movie, like, plot kind of takes over. Like, in the process of not watching Sydney, she just doesn't just sit there and wait to get murdered. She disappears. And essentially, as she disappears and whatnot, oh, we forgot to mention her dad's there too, because they were going to kill him also, but he's just, like, duct taped up and kind of forgotten about for the most part. Billy freaks out. Sydney gets away, and she essentially kills both of them. So, am I missing much?
No, I did like the scenes where Matthew Lillard, they're cutting each other, stabbing each other, or whatever, and he's just like, "You cut too close, man. You cut me real deep."
Oh,
I just thought it was
Uzi meme.
Yeah, I think. Doing the good, bad, meh. I didn't really have any meh. I really like the pacing of the movie. I thought it was, it's like almost 2 hours. I think it's an hour and 50 minutes or so, but it moves really quickly. Yep. It moves from one thing to the next. Mm-hmm. The bad I have in
That's
here.
One of the things I was going to say. Yeah. Is that it's a 2 hour movie, but it never feels like a 2 hour movie. Even having seen it a bunch of times, I never look at my watch like, well, I guess you wouldn't do that if you're watching it more than once, but I never feel like this movie's dragging. Even there's a couple things I feel like, I don't know that I needed the backstory with Cotton Weary and the mom and all that type of stuff, but it doesn't linger on it long enough to feel like it's not there. And it does make Billy a stronger villain in the end.
I am not a big fan of Matthew Lillard. Like, he's always kind of annoyed me, but he plays like, he is the Super Saiyan 90s douchebag in this movie. Like douchey teenager kid, or he's so punchable. But he does do a really good job being that really annoying friend. He's kind of like a pussy hound, and he's just, you can tell he's just kind of in it for himself. But he does a good job. I don't like I don't like most of the roles he plays. I don't like him as an actor. He's just a very specific douchey.
He's got 2 movies that he's in that I really like him in, and this is one of them.
Yeah.
So,
what's the other one?
SLC Punk.
Okay. Yeah. I could see that. I think he's tolerable in that too.
Well, I think I like the movie more than I like him, but he doesn't bother me in that movie, if that makes sense. So
yeah, that's almost a ringing endorsement where an actor that you find extremely annoying and he doesn't bother me. I mean, you might as well just give him an Oscar for that.
Well, he's not bad in that movie. He's just not. Like, in this movie, I think he's, like, I'll go as far to say I think he's great in this movie.
Yeah.
He's great to the point where I can't see another actor playing this character. Like, I think he's that spot on for it. With SLC Punk, we're not talking about that movie today, but I don't know that would be the same case. You could probably get someone else to play that guy. So some of the things I would say, my meh and my dislikes are kind of one and the same in this. I don't really dislike anything in this movie, but there's things that I think are kind of meh or questionable in it. One of the things I think is questionable or meh on it would be Ghostface's plan is kind of fucking stupid. If he's like, he tries to kill Sydney twice right at the beginning of this movie. He tries to kill her in the bathroom and he tries to kill her in her house. So if your plan is to get her to this house and kill her dad and kill her and all this, why are you attacking her at the beginning of the movie? That's not very well thought out. And furthermore, the bathroom scene especially doesn't make sense because you see both Stu and Billy like right on the bookends of that scene, neither of which are in costume, and you see them both move away from that bathroom. So it doesn't really make sense how the fuck that scene happens. I've seen that Williamson did not like that scene, the writer, but Wes Craven really thought it needed another like scare scene, so he kind of played the Wes Craven card and won because, you know, he's Wes Craven. It was one of the few times I would say if you were gonna take a scene out, I wouldn't even take the full scene out. Like, you can have the two like disgusting chicks that stick her finger in her mouth after she wipes herself. That's fine. Like, I don't care about that. But I would take the Ghostface part out of it because I don't think I mean, it's fine. You get another scare scene out of it, but it doesn't really make sense, like, in retrospect on it.
Yeah, I think you could leave that scene in with all the things that they say about her and make her feel like shit about herself and not have, like you said, not have the Ghostface part in it and still be effective for the movie.
Leading to going with the beginning of the movie, another thing I don't really... So, I'm going to admit, like, in 1996 when this came out, I think we had internet, but I was pretty uninterested in it because it was like, I was obviously a kid and it was like dial up. And for those who don't remember dial up, it sucked. Could you call 911 via command line with the internet? Because I don't remember being able to do that. Especially if the phone line's cut at that point. So if the phone line's cut, the internet's going to go out, or she was just on the phone, which also would have knocked the internet out because you had to reset the modem to get the internet back on when the phone hung up. So I don't understand how she calls 911 via command line.
I have that in my notes too, and I think what it is when you look at when they show the computer screen, it says something about hearing impaired. So it could be that they have.
Okay.
It could be like it's an ISDN line, which is like a phone line, but it runs, parallel to your phone.
It looks like MS-DOS.
Yeah. Well, it looks like oh geez,
It looks like command line from DOS.
No, I would say it's DOS. It looks like I don't know, like
Linux?
Like a modem, like a shit. I don't even know these days what the program's called, but there's like, it's not a Windows program. It is something that runs in DOS, but it's like, you would use it to call BBSs or whatnot before they had, let's not get into it. Before you used Windows to get online to use Trumpet WinSock or whatever you used in Windows 3.1, before Windows 95, you would use something like this to call it BBS. So I'm thinking it's like a Telnet or something, but it's a hearing impaired 911. And I thought, like, I had never heard of someone calling 911 on a computer through a phone line, basically.
If this was happening in 2022, which they have a movie in 2022 and they don't do this, but if this particular movie was set in 2022, I would totally buy that you could text 911 or something like that.
For sure.
Like,
yep.
I would, but in this particular setting, I was, again, ignorant to it. I'll fully play ignorant to it, but I don't remember that being a thing.
Yeah, like I said, I think they're telnetting or something into some service that you're always connected to. And I think she even cancels it before, because that's when Billy comes through the window, right? He's like,
right.
And she's like, oh,
well,
they call.
I don't know if she sends it or not.
Oh, yeah.
So I think she sends it because Dewey gets there shortly after that.
Yeah.
But she's got like this rigged up like door thing where like you can't open her closet door and her bedroom door at the same time or something.
Yeah. That's how she keeps out Ghostface.
And Dad. But he's basically trying to break down the door and at some point disappears and then, there's Billy again.
Yeah. Well, that's when he drops the cell phone and it's like, why do you have this? Like he gets
It's like he dropped a pistol. So
yeah. It just thuds on the floor. I'm like, what the fuck is that?
It's also like, how did you secure that? Like, did you put that in your pocket and like put the knife in the pocket too and cut through the pocket? Like, I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's not a tiny phone. It's not a teeny tiny flip phone. It's a rather large cell.
It's a 1996 cell phone.
Yeah.
So the only other thing I really had, there's two things. And I do think most of the characters in this are pretty believable as teenagers. The only one I would say I don't really find that believable as a teenager is Nev Campbell. So she's actually 23 when this movie came out, which is pretty normal for actresses playing high school kids. But unlike everyone else, she's the only one I was like, she's acting like she's a 23-year-old, not like a 17-year-old to me.
Yeah.
In a lot of this movie.
Yeah, Rose McGowan's actually older than her, I think, and she acts more like, you would expect a teenager to act.
Yeah, it's a minor gripe, but it is kind of noticeable. And the last thing I'd say that's kind of fucking weird in this that I really don't understand is at the end of the movie when she scurries away from, the two Magoos that are trying to kill her. Why does she put the Ghostface costume on before she runs into Billy with the umbrella? She goes into the closet, she hides, and she comes out and she has a Ghostface costume on it. And I never really got why she felt the need to put that on.
Yeah, I didn't really get that either. I didn't understand why you would take the time to put that on.
Yeah.
You're the only one in there.
You're not going to scare them.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
They know that you're not Bill or Stewie, whatever. Stewie. They know that you're not one of the two of them. So why did I don't fucking understand. And how funny would it have been if Dewey woke up and shot her because
right. Oh my God. She
Right.
was the killer all along.
That would have been funny.
Yeah. It's a good twist.
Rewrite it. But yeah, I mean, all those things are kind of minor gripes. And really the stuff like her putting the costume on, if you go back through any classic horror movie, you're going to see something like, why the fuck did they do that? That's a pretty common thing you say watching any horror movie, really. But past that, I can't really say I have much of any gripes on this. In terms of our hot dog ranking, I would give this probably 9 hot dogs out of 10 Dewey ice cream cones. This movie to me, it's a classic. It's truthfully one of my all-around favorites. You've heard me babble about this movie many a times, I'm sure. I can't recommend this one highly enough. I think as far as if you're new to horror movies, this is a really good starting point. It's not so over the top. It's not like going in and watching Nail Gun Massacre and being like, oh, well, this is what horror movies are. This is a good starting point where
this is what these horror movies are that the kids are talking about.
Right. No, this is a good starting point where it's got, at least on the first time that you watch it, it's got some good intensity. It's got some good scares. It plays really well. It's well written. It's well acted. And it's not getting quite to the point where you feel like you need nerd decoder ring to get through and figure out what's going on in this movie.
Yeah, I think for me, I wouldn't give it as high of a rating as you did. I would say it's probably 8. I'd give it probably 8 hot dogs out of 2 hard nipples. And the reason is, that's like an iconic scene and they think they showed that in the trailer.
It's one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie.
Not too bad. But
it's Marilyn Manson approved.
Well, let's sidebar that. But I think at the time, it was one of those things where you couldn't go on Halloween. You couldn't walk through a subdivision for probably 5 years without seeing a Ghostface mask. So it did really start to kind of, I don't know, wear out its welcome with me for a while. And then watching this again was like, oh, no, this is really good. And when I remember at the time, it being one of those movies that really kind of was the next step in horror movies. We had the slasher films in the 80s. This is a mid-90s movie, and it really pushed horror movies to the next level. Then we started seeing other, like you said earlier, copycat kind of movies. But it really redefined the genre for the mid-90s. I think it's a really good movie. I don't really know why I would say not 9. Why I wouldn't give it better. I just feel like there's other stuff out there. I'm more of an 80s horror kind of guy. I would rank some of those 80s style horror movies maybe a little bit higher, but I would still, an 8 isn't bad by any means. And I do think it's, if you haven't seen it, sorry for spoiling it for you, but I think it's definitely worth a watch, and it's definitely one that you can go back even to now. I mean, the only thing that you're really missing modern day horror movies in this is that there's not, there's cell phones, but there's only one or two. So it's like you can't call somebody. But that seems like even now that's not really a major point, to a lot of movies. So it's not really even kind of pulling you out of the realm of belief or whatever because there's no cell phones. But it just really works. Like we mentioned earlier, the pacing is just so good. The writing is really good. The characters are relatable. And the whole movie, you're just like, oh, you're constantly like thinking about things that have happened in the movie to say, oh, is this, especially at the beginning, I would say that first hour and 15, you're constantly like evaluating to think like, oh, is this character, could this character be the one? Could it be this? Could it be this? Even just random characters that pop up, that make appearances. And that first part earlier with Drew Barrymore being so just kind of shocking really sets you up to realize that this is going to be a very different experience than what you're probably used to in a horror movie.
So going back a little there, I would agree with you that I think I'm more of an 80s horror guy than like a 90s one as well. It's kind of the genesis of where this podcast came from, is talking about old shitty horror movies.
Yeah.
I say shitty as a term of endearment. Yeah. But I don't think that means that this can't be a fantastic movie at the same time.
No. By all means, this is a really good one.
And I do think that, so I don't remember if I saw this in theaters or not, or if it was, I would have been, so my freshman year was 97, so I would have been in 8th grade when this came out. So it's plausible I could have seen this in the theater. I don't remember for sure though, but I do know that I was pretty deep in the rabbit hole of horror movies at that point. And I think what ruined this movie for me was really nothing to do with the movie. And again, I said this earlier in retrospect, all of a sudden, all these kids that were like not watching horror movies were coming in like, this is the scariest movie ever. I'm like, this is not that scary of a movie.
Yeah.
Like it kind of, there's this really stupid thing that, and I admit this is probably a me problem as much as anything. Like when you find your weird thing that, it's your thing and you're kind of the one who gets it, and you have your weird little group of weirdos that hang out with you and they also get it. And then all of a sudden the guy who like throws a football really well is like, I also like horror movies. It kind of pisses you off for whatever reason. I say
that's my 9 Inch Nails moment.
Yeah, and maybe that's a high school thing, like, because I don't really think of it that way, but I also don't pay attention to what anyone else gives a shit about at this point. Like, I was more aware of that at that time. So between, like, this whole group of, like, not weird kids, like, I'm like, you're popular and you've already, like, had several girlfriends, and I'm still in the basement and I have like, what the fuck?
And I am not any of those things.
Right. Like, I think that was a big thing that kind of turned me off to this franchise for longer than it should have. But again, just the more I go back to this movie and the more I watch it, the more it really is a testament to Wes Craven. It's a testament to the writing of this movie and really the actors of this movie. This is just a fantastic film. Like, I don't really have to go more than that on it. So, I mean, I'm fine. I'm not going to argue you giving it an 8. I didn't expect you to give it like where I did on it, just because I know in terms of slasher movies, I almost feel like because of everything I just said with the whole people who lived through this movie coming out in theaters and that era, I think it almost has like a little bit of a stain on it because of that, because so many people remember, like, horror movie nerds are fucking stupid people, just like Star Wars nerds and, comic book nerds. We get really mad when you fuck with our thing that we're nerding out about. So
yeah,
I think a lot of people kind of hold that against it, but I can't really deny that the more I go back to this movie, the more it holds up and the more I really like it. So that's why I've kind of, over the years, if we had been doing this podcast in 1996, I'd be impressed that we had the technology to make this podcast.
Yeah.
But if we had been doing this in 1996, I probably would have given this like a 6 or something like that out of 10. And it's just kind of gradually moved up the line as far as like this type of movie goes over the years as I've grown to appreciate it more and more.
Yeah. And I think with this movie, like we said, with the cultural phenomenon that it was, it really, its reputation preceded it so far ahead. You had to be not dedicated to watch it, but to kind of see, and I totally get what you're saying. Sometimes, like, hearing everybody talk about something that you're interested in kind of puts like you said, a stain, or it kind of hangs a cloud over it where you're sometimes not so open-minded to watch it. But And when like I said, the first time watching this was like, oh shit, this is shocking that they kill the main person at the beginning. The twist in it, that's a really big twist. But then, like you said, you've gone back several times. When you watch it with like older eyes or watching it with a little bit more knowledge, you can see the craftsmanship that went into it. Like, this is a masterful telling of this story, and the way that they put these twists throughout most of the movie, even until the very end. It's just, it's a really great movie, even for people that might not be into horror, because maybe more thriller people or mystery kind of people that might not be into horror because of the gore or whatnot. It's a little gory, but it's not actually even that bad. But it does
really,
keep
once
you
you
on your
get past
toes.
once you get past Drew Barrymore, there's really not much in this movie that wouldn't be on TNT on any given Sunday night.
Yeah, they might even just edit out a little bit, the language and whatnot. But
yeah,
other than that, it's not a horror standard.
Yeah, we don't have. This isn't Silent Night, Deadly Night, or something like that.
Yeah,
so,
this is no Serbian film.
Right. So I think we're going to kind of cap it here and save the sequel talk for the sequels, because there are 4 more of these to get to, and we got a 6th one coming out next year. Well, the only thing we'll say with that is what we hit at the beginning, where, enjoy this performance now, because apparently we're not getting any more Nev Campbell in Scream movies, although I feel like it could change if it's just a money thing.
Yeah,
but
I'm sure that's all negotiable.
Right. So we'll see what happens with it. But in the meantime, check this one out. Make sure to follow us on all the socials. We are at Dewey Podmonster on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff. You can always like and subscribe. We would absolutely like that. If you share us, we would dig that too. Also, if you go to our site at anchor.fm/Dewey Podmonster, I think I got that right this time. There's an option to leave a message for us there. We would love that. We would gladly appreciate your feedback that we could share on the show. Sean, you want to go ahead and plug your plugs?
Yeah, before I get into that, just if you have an opinion on this movie, let us know maybe your experience when you saw this movie. What did you think of it? And maybe you didn't watch it when it came out. Maybe you did. Let us know about it. Leave a message on the website. But you can find me, youtube.drafttherapy.com. That'll take you directly to my YouTube channel, and I review mostly Michigan beer. I've been kind of dipping my toes in a little bit outside of the state stuff. More recently, I'll have a cider review up by the time this video goes up. Went to Blake's and drank some Blake's strawberry lemonade's hard cider, which is a weird thing to think that there's hard cider that's strawberry lemonade, but I'll talk all about it. But yeah, you can find me on social media under Draft Therapy. You can follow me there.
That actually sounds pretty good with it being summer right now. So I would drink it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's definitely a really good summer kind of drink.
Cool. All right. Well, then until next time, make sure to check your call ID if someone calls you. If you do want to engage in horror movie trivia, you can do that at any point. There's plenty of mediums to do that. And we will talk to you next week. All right, welcome back. This is John. I'm doing something. Fucking up left and right this week.